from Arsenal this weekend, and what a contrast to previous trips over the last 6 seasons in Manchester and against Chelsea. 16 games in total for Arsenal, 13 defeats, 2 wins, the 5-3 against Chelsea, which I remember, Jamie, you described as a basketball game, and in 2010 when they beat City, who played 85 minutes of that match with 10 men. Some heavy defeats in there. In total, Arsenal conceded 43 goals. That's more than 2.5 a game. They won just 7 points from a possible 48. So what on earth was so different this time around?
Well, watching it, I was shocked. I couldn't believe Arsene Wenger went with those tactics because it's been so long since we've seen an Arsenal team do that. But on the other hand, I was happy. I'm sick of hearing my own voice saying the same things about Arsenal after big games. I think besides Manchester City, the team, the supporters and the club, I think it feels like the whole country's pleased that Arsenal won that game in that manner and the way they done it, because we thought they weren't capable of doing that. You know, for a long time in those big games, the same things happen week after week. And thank God there was something different. As he said on commentary, hallelujah.
What were those different things you saw in previous games then?
Well, I think it's important we go back to this game last season, the 6-3 game. And the big difference was, in how Arsenal set up, was you had a midfield 4, as they had yesterday. But this position here, Ozil, was in front of that midfield 4. The difference was yesterday we had Coquelin in that position. And also there's this. Aaron Ramsey going out to engage these things. There was a lot more discipline yesterday. You can see that getting men behind the ball. The defensive line is a little bit higher than it was yesterday. And the problem was, as we see it again, it comes in, going to press, leaving these areas, and who's in there? The best creative player in the country. And that's what happened yesterday. And look at that, ball goes into Silva, and you're dead when he gets the ball in those positions. And that's happened a lot. They conceded 6 in the game. But also on the flip side of that, Arsenal going forward, if there's one clip that I think shows Arsenal over these last few years in big away games, it's this one. Losing the ball 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Completely taken out of the game now. And Arsene Wenger said yesterday, defending his tactics, normally we're 2 or 3-0 down early on and we have to open up. I don't agree with that. That's at 1-1 in this game. They went down 1-0, they got it back to 1-1. So they got so many players ahead of the game. 1 or 2 passes. Look at this. I didn't see David Silva pick that ball up yesterday in that amount of space once. And that's why decisions like that and the way they're defending, they lost 6 in this game. They lost 5 at Liverpool, 8 at Manchester United a few years ago, 6 at Chelsea last season. And there was definitely a sea change yesterday. It was definitely different. So
explain the difference yesterday. Why wasn't Silva getting the ball in those areas?
Well, the way they set up. A touch deeper, but the big difference is obviously they have this player there, Coquelin, instead of someone in front of that midfield, as we've mentioned. But the one word that was used throughout the day from Graham Souness, Gary, Thierry Henry was discipline. Look at Santi Cazorla there, his head moving, what's behind him. He is initially going to close this down, has a look over his shoulder and thinks, no, I've got to protect, forget the man on the ball, stop the ball going into those attacking players. And that was the difference from yesterday, as we saw. Again, people spoke about David Silva and the job Coquelin done on him yesterday. There's Silva, there's Coquelin. I don't think it was about one player. It was about the unit. Look at the space between Mertesacker and the centre midfield player, Koscielny. There was no space there. They were a compact unit, and they stopped David Silva and the other creative players by that, playing as a unit. It wasn't an individual. Coquelin now, he has the age to go and press. Watch him, stops, checks back. That was the difference, the discipline. Now look, you've still got that 3 players there, always in front, not engaging with the ball. Look at David Silva, pointing for company. Go back with the ball. Go back. He knows he can't receive it. He wants the ball moving again so he can try and find a different position. Company, nothing on. He looked to switch the ball again. Look how compact that team is. There's nowhere for City to go. As I said, we criticised David Silva. He was quiet. What can you do when there's no space? Again, as that ball goes back, we're talking about the midfield all day yesterday. Let's just run it on as this ball comes to Demichelis. Stop there. What's the space between centre-back and midfield player? You talk about players getting in the pockets, as we showed on the earlier one. There's no space there. I can't criticise City's players too much because there's no space there. What can you do? But this is a big thing now. Silva, being the clever player he is, that's where the space was. There, away from these three central midfield players. Now you've got a decision to make. Sanchez. Normally you'd want a wide player going with the fullback. What would happen then is you get the ball in there and then Silva's in business. He's looking for passes in there for maybe these runs there. But I think what Sanchez does is fantastic. Stop David Silva getting on that ball and leave the fullback free and say, Monreal, do your job, as fullback should do. Get out there quickly instead of asking me to do your job. And he gets out there again. And it's like a proper shape. What we see plenty of other teams do, but we don't see enough of Arsenal. Silva gets the ball. Who's around him? Cazorla. There with the holding midfield player, Coquelin. And there's Ramsey. And this counter-attack now, 30 or 40 seconds later, leads to the penalty. And that's what we saw all day. A massive sea change in the tactics of Arsene Wenger.
But up in the studio, 1-0 at half-time, start the second half. The boys in the studio were really concerned. I think it was about a sort of 10, 15-minute period about Arsenal. Did you share that concern at the time?
Yeah, I was watching the game, and I think it was a 5-10 minutes of madness of the old Arsenal. And I was watching the game, screaming at the TV. I'm not an Arsenal fan. What are you doing? Let's have a look at it now. And this is the chance where I think if City do score, Arsenal are in big problems. And it was like the old Arsenal for 5 or 10 minutes. I couldn't understand it. Fantastic first half, had a certain way of playing. Cazorla, bit of magic as he showed all day, best player on the pitch. And now, that's Ramsey and that's Cazorla. And that's Giroud who plays the ball, who's in a central midfield position, but he's obviously, as a striker, he's going to go bomb forward. So Cazorla picks it up. They've got bodies flooding forward. This is after about an hour. So we're not talking late in the game. Cazorla loses the ball now. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out the game. We run it on now, and they can't get back in. And the problem is, as it comes into David Silva, he checks inside, and now your holding midfield player, Coquelin, is alone. He had help all day, people around him. He can't cover that in that middle of the pitch on his own. David Silva then finds that ball into Jovetic, and they play it wide. As it comes into him there, now, look at the difference. Space between him and the fullback, Koscielny. Mertesacker and the right back, the whole midfield player. We didn't see that other than this 5 or 10 minutes. And as I've said, madness. What were they thinking? At times, they went forward, and Ramsey could have maybe got another goal or two. But this was the only chance, or only time I thought Man City looked like scoring.
But when Arsenal fans say to you they were taking risks, and eventually they did get their reward.
Well, they took risks for years and got nothing from it, so it was stupid.
Fair enough.
Yeah, and this is the only chance Man City had, where they look like scoring. And it all comes from that sort of lack of discipline, going back to the Arsenal for the last 5 or 10 minutes. But as you've mentioned, going forward, they do get the second goal from that. Now, this is just, I mean, from Manchester City's point of view, just run it on. As Cazorla starts to take his run up, go on, Santi.
Speed him up.
Come on. As he takes his move there, Demichelis not watching the ball. Fernando not watching the ball. Frank Lampard, wrong side of him. So the setup is poor, unorganised. I think Pellegrini said after the game, that's 5 goals. The last 5 goals have come from set pieces. And he whips in. So just a poor setup. I mean, Fernando loses Giroud, and he had a poor day all day, really, Fernando. And that just summed it up, really. But from Giroud's point of view, he's a striker who we don't class as maybe world class. That's 4 in his last 5, and he's got a lot of headed goals. And as soon as he was fit, he was put straight back into that team. So, massive win for them. Huge win. I get that. And I'm just pleased watching an Arsene Wenger team, an Arsenal team, playing a different way, going somewhere and getting a big result.
And they did it with only 35% of possession. That's the lowest in a away game for Arsenal since Opta Stats began on the Premier League 11 years ago. And there's a pattern there, Gary. Just explain what this means.
Well, I think when we've talked about Arsenal over this last 5, 6, 7, 8 years, we never would ask them to change their principles when we analyse them, because they're a fantastic football team. You don't ditch your principles, but what we'd ask them to be is just adaptable. And in certain games, there is nothing wrong with just dropping back and respecting the team that you're playing against. And it's been well, it's sticking to your own principles, bordering on lack of respect and arrogance at times, I think, the way Arsenal have approached away games. That shows you, actually, there is another way to win football matches. Arsenal have used it themselves many times in the last 10, 11 years. When they've actually had the lowest possessions, they've won most of the games. So
and I sense on commentary that one part of that you enjoyed, the resilience, if you like, was the way they defended set pieces. Would that be right?
Well, they had 16 corners to defend. And Jamie, a couple of weeks ago, or 3 or 4 weeks ago, particularly on Mertesacker, was very hard, and I think rightly hard as well. There's Mertesacker. I think the words that Jamie used were he abandoned ship. He left his younger teammates in the mess. And you look at this now, the big players are at the back, around here. That's where the danger is, and he ends up ducking on this one. Now, we talk about leadership. That is leadership minus 1,000. That is the worst type of thing that you could see on a football pitch. You want your big dominant centre-half, your sort of captain-type figure to go and head everything that moves. And yesterday, in the very first corner of the game, it was noticeable. 2 things. One, the position of Mertesacker. He's going saying to Kompany, to Fernando, to Demichelis, I'm with you lot. I'm standing in and amongst you, I'm going to put you off, and I'm going to take responsibility. So, again, another sign of good play. Not just that. Move it forward a touch. Just there now. Just back a touch there. It's Koscielny. Moving that zone away from here, where Arsenal have been done so many times, when players come and attack them from this zone, and they're all attacking into there, and you've got static defenders. Koscielny actually moves them up. Look at him. He's moving the zone out towards where the danger is. So you talk about learning and progression. This was a progression in more ways than one yesterday for Arsenal. Not just in their approach to the game in general, their discipline, but also to defend 16 corners for Manchester City, who have got a lot of good headers of the ball, was a fantastic achievement as well. And it needs mentioning because they've struggled in those moments.